how are young people approaching mental health differently than what other people have done in different generations?
Yeah, and I think Jess hit it on the head right before this question mark. I think Jess outlined sort of the mental health component and the difference between mental health and gun control, and how those are not actually that separate in terms of the substance of the issues, but we've created that divide. When it comes to young people, there's two facts to think about. One is that the CDC has identified gun violence and suicide as the second leading cause of death. And the second fact is that there's a study performed by a psychologist named Robert Leahy, where he describes that the average mental health condition of a Gen Z member is the same as the average mental health condition of someone in the 50s in a mental health ward. That's huge. You think about the level of anxiety, you think about the level of imposter syndrome that occurs because of social media. Those are real problems we have to contend with. The other thing is the rise in anxiety caused by social media, caused by technology, the fact that we all are dependent on these different tools for how we think about issues. And Jess can get a little bit more into how our generation is approaching the differences as compared to older generations about the issue of mental health. And side note is there's a lot of progress there, actually. Because this problem is so pervasive, our generation is uniquely equipped to address the problem. But we have to recognize and exercise some strategic empathy. This is the reality. Young people are under a lot of mental health pressure, so let's do something about it.
Manu, before we get to, I'm sure Mark has more questions, but before we get to those, I want to touch on something that you just said. You talked about social media. It's so important to this discussion. Social media has been vilified, rightfully so, for contributing to a lot of these issues that we're talking about. Do you think there's a positive in there that has helped your generation become, more open with each other, more empathetic, maybe as a result?
Well, I know that Jess is far more qualified than I am to answer this question, given that she's the marketing director of Bridge USA. The only thing that I would add from my sort of Luddite, technologically backwards perspective, even though I'm a young person, is it's two sides of the same coin. The positive is that never in human history have people been so connected. That's huge. The reason why our civilization, when you track the progress of humanity, the ability to communicate is what allowed us to actually build civilization, allowed us to build progress. So we have to have some perspective. Now, the flip side of that situation is that I don't think we still know how to use it as a tool. Right now, social media controls our lives. We don't control social media. And I think our generation is uniquely equipped to solve that problem, because my brother, for example, Juliana, is growing up with an iPad, right? He's in 5th grade right now. He lives and breathes technology, and he's figured out, and his friends have figured out, they don't use Facebook, social media for news. They just use it to connect with each other for the purpose of its original conception. And so I think that's the difference in our generations, is that we're starting to figure out how to actually utilize social media to better our lives, instead of using and letting the destruction of social media actually interrupt the way we run our lives. And I think that distinction is important.
Really well said. Man,
yeah.
This is so encouraging.
Yeah. But could I actually, Juliana, Jessica, I would like to know, because, Chris and I basically started ASP with a couple of people and this idea, and just, we used what we had to knock on doors. And quite frankly, from a very naive perspective, dealt with the marketing and the social media of it later. I would even say we didn't think about it. We wanted a website, which apparently you all don't go to these things. You just have phones.
Those aren't a thing anymore, Mark. Those aren't a thing.
Yeah. So Jessica, I am curious from your perspective as, where that bridge, where that line is between social media marketing and mental manipulation.
Yeah. I guess I can also speak to this because I'm a journalism major. So you kind of have to figure out how to be able to resonate with your audience, which I find really helpful when I am doing marketing. Going back to what motivates people, a lot of young people do agree that they want to see better democracy. They want to see more action in our government. And that's kind of the underlying message in a lot of our marketing, for example, is saying that, hey, these things are possible. Look at what we're doing here, and look at how many chapters we have here. And that's really encouraging to people. As far as social media goes, I think that's brought a new aspect to seeing that we're all we go through the same things. We experience a lot of similar things. I know a lot of people, I feel like, are very open to discussing mental health and maybe anxiety or ADHD, on Twitter or on Instagram, and sharing facts about it that, one, educate people, but then two, also kind of say oh, hey, it's okay to have these. People do. And so social media definitely can help there. The negative side is I think it kind of also aids us in our echo chambers, which is something that needs to be worked on. But I think that it does help us to be connected really with each other.
So how is this to all three of you young geniuses? How is Bridge USA specifically trying to encourage young people to get involved? Because that's the hardest thing, right? You can offer the information, you can lead a horse to water, you can't get it to drink. How are you actually getting young people to choose engagement?
Ross, you want to take that one?
Yeah. So we're there are kind of different things that you have to do. One is you have to actually convince people that it's worth it, right? And we see this problem on campuses a lot. You have the extremes that are very politically active, and then you have a broad swath of people that have given up. They've said, politics is too toxic. We can't do this, right? So I'm just not going to engage. And so what we do a lot is convincing people that they actually can engage in a productive way, that they're safe to do that, and they can learn a lot out of it. But I mean, fundamentally, we don't really have a choice. If you're a young person out there today and you look at our politics and you say, wow, that's nasty, and I don't want to get involved in that, you have to realize that if we don't do it, no one else will. So we tell them, you have to get engaged because there's really no other choice. And also I would say, we have to embrace our differences. And that's something that we love to talk about at Bridge is that difference is really the strength of America. And people may think that it divides us, but in reality, that's where the richness of America truly is. And so embracing that difference and then showing young people it's all right. Because once you get someone in a Bridge USA discussion, they might be hesitant at first. They're like, oh, are there going to be, these people there? Are they going to attack me for this? And then we sit them down, you have a productive conversation, and the light bulb goes off. And they say, oh, I could have been doing this at home. I could have been doing this in the workplace with my roommates, right? And so I think really showing people that you can do it and have them taking that first step is kind of like, the starting point of how to get people actually involved in politics in a productive way into the future.
And Chris, could I just say one thing on what just Ross said? Ross, every day he talks with like 15 students. He's the one that's actually managing all of our chapters and talking to these young people. And I think he's slightly underselling what he actually does, which is he's actually helping young people see a different path. That's huge. And people undermine and denigrate the possibility and the moment and opportunity that happens when you actually talk to someone one-on-one. And that's very powerful. And we can't forget that the fundamental unit of democracy are people, us. We move things forward. We got to talk to people in a better way, in a productive way, in an empathetic way. So I just want to give a shout out to Ross for all that he's doing and actually managing and helping these young people get a new way forward.
Let me give a shout out to all three of you. These answers are great. My goodness. Good stuff, team.
Absolutely. Wow. I totally agree. We've talked a lot during this conversation about you and your generation. And of course, that's incredibly important. But we have to acknowledge here that that's just half the picture. And the other half is our leadership in our country. And so this is a question for any of you. What do you think our political leaders could do better to foster a more productive political climate in this country?
I think that we constantly talk about working across the aisle, but nowadays it seems to be under some kind of circumstance. We're always waiting for the other side to compromise or to act first when it comes to their stances or their policy. And I think the idea of party politics has become the new norm and really kind of aids in this as well. Many politicians often think that they need to speak to their loudest base, when in reality, our politicians need to take up the position that they're leaders and take ownership of the fact that working together is in their hands. Have a little humility. Acknowledge that your party might not have all the right answers, and there's always improvement. I think it's important to know that working together is necessary for the success of our democracy.
Let me ask you this along those lines, and this could be anything we've talked about, from mental health, school safety to gun reform. You guys, as you said, talk to your constituents, your peers, or slightly younger than you every day. Specifically, what are the main issues that you would ask to see in terms of reforms of our leaders?
I would say that, and by the way, that pause demonstrates how complex the issue is. And I think that demonstrates, and we have to sit with that. It's okay. We don't have direct and easy answers. And I think each of us would actually say something nuanced and different. And I think we should allow that, because that is exactly what moves progress and arguments forward. I know that Ross, Jess, and I have been thinking a lot about school safety, gun control, and the bifurcation in these issues. And what you'll find, Mark, is that, as Jess said earlier, conservatives often say, and people that sometimes ascribe to conservatism will sometimes say that guns aren't killing people, people are killing people. And on the left, you'll have a lot of folks say that actually, no, it's that we need to make sure that it's a lot easier to have guns. The fact that oftentimes a lot of people will say on this side is that there's 3 times as many guns as there are people in this country. And so recognizing those two facts, I think the important part of this is that we all want to live. You know, it doesn't matter which party you're on, we all want to live. And so the importance here is that there's a lot of easy mental health measures that we can pass. You know, things focusing on lowering the cost of anxiety drugs, making it easy for students to actually have access to mental health counselors, thinking about a lot of the specific school shootings and actually being able to study them. That's the other fact. Until 2 years ago, the CDC couldn't actually study gun violence. How can you solve a problem without studying it? That's like so we learned in like 5th grade is you can't have an hypothesis without testing it. So that's what I would say. I don't know, Jess or Ross, do you have anything to add to that?